Hi my friend, in this video we're going to be making a tech house song by recreating HUGEL and DIPLO's song Stay High. And we're going to find out if we can do it in under 7 days, completely mixing, mastering it, and arranging it so it's all ready to go. So right here is a look at the Ableton project file that we'll be working on. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going in order of how I actually built out this song. So the very first thing we'll be going over is the drums. Let me just also add in the kick there. And the drums. So we'll be starting by recreating this. And then what we'll be adding in after that is the bass. And once we've added in the bass, then we'll add in all the rest of the melodic elements. So the idea here is that I built out this track by following along with the DIPLO and HUGEL song Stay High. So I actually have this song as a reference track in this project. And that's how I was able to recreate everything by following along to that. All in all, this whole thing, mixed, mastered, and arranged, took me about 4 days and about maybe 4 hours. And if you want to finish songs faster too, I made a free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that I used to completely finish one song every single week. Visit the link in the description to grab the Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit for free. And with that said, let's get into this. Alright. So now that we're back in the Ableton project file, let's dive right into creating these drums. So what you're listening to right now is the drum tracks that I built up and that I'm going to be showing you how to create right now. So if we go ahead and flick between the reference tracks, so let's press S. This is the original DIPLO and HUGEL song. So when we go back to the one that I pre-made, you can hear it's quite similar. And so to help you create this as authentically as possible, what I'm going to do is mute everything. And we're going to start doing everything in the order that I actually developed these drums so that you can kind of follow along. So the first thing is we have this 4 on the floor kick. There's basically no processing going on here. The volume's even panned at 0. Basically what I did was I went into the reference track, so let's listen to that right now, and looked for a part in the song where there was just the drums. So you can hear in the outro, there's just the drums playing. Another common place to look, and probably the first place you'll look, is the intro. But in this song, if you listen to the intro here, you can tell that paying attention to the kick in particular, you could tell a bunch of the lows has been taken out of the intro when compared to the outro. So this is the area that I chose to build the track around. So listening now to our kick, the way that I got this kick is a little bit of a trick that I found from a really cool producer named Dilby. And so what you do is you go into the reference track and you look for a kick. So like right about there. So we can just loop that and play it over and over. So that's the actual sound from the kick. Then what you do is you drag that onto 3 separate audio tracks. I'll show you exactly what that looks like. Just want to get the kick playing. It's nice to have some sound going. You put it onto 3 separate audio tracks like I've done here. And you have one for the high, one for the medium, one for the low. So you drag the exact same kick that you've grabbed from the sample into each one of these tracks. And then you apply a multi-blend compressor that looks a little bit like this. The multi-blend compressor looks like this. You would drag that on to, say, the high here. And you would solo the high frequency so that on the high track, just the highs are coming out. On the mids, what you would do is you'd have a multi-band compressor on that one as well, and you would solo the mids. And then lastly, you would do the same thing for the low, and you would then solo the low. Then what you can do is consolidate that, so then you can see what the information is for each and every single one for this kick drum for the lows, mediums, and high. And then you can adjust the length of the clip to sound good, basically. And then export that out into a final kick drum, which you can see right here, which then I dragged into this clip kick track. So we have the 4 on the 4 playing here, follow the mouse. And then I just dragged this sample into the drum rack. So now we have this kick playing, and I can change it if I'd like to. If you'd like a more in-depth tutorial on that, definitely check out the Dilby stealing kicks tutorial. I don't want to go too in-depth because it's not my idea. But that's how the kick started. And once I layered in the kick, basically I would just switch between this kick track and the reference, trying to get the volumes right, because the volumes is about 80% of the battle here. So once the kick was created, the next thing that I built up was this top track. So what I did was I just found a sample on Splice, and nothing too crazy in terms of processing, but we are removing a ton of the lows, doing a little bit of one knob side chaining, and using a little bit of this one knob width plugin, just to kind of push it away from the center, get rid of a bunch of the lows. So we're mostly going to be using the kick and the elements that we place in here. So we're not using the tops for the majority of the drum track. It's just for kind of some extra texture. So that's the first one, kind of building the groove by adding a top track. Then added another top track. This one's a little bit more progressive. It is called progressive, but this is what it sounds like on its own. Little bits of percussion and some hi-hats and almost shakers. So we'll layer that on here. Again, removing a bunch of the lows, side chaining it, and adding some width, so then pushing it to the left and right channels instead of having it straight down the middle. And this is kind of just adding the vibe and a little bit of feeling to the track and getting a kind of groove, because the main elements are then going to come in here. We have this hi-hat, and there is a few different hi-hats playing. So what we have here is, if I were to just open this up, you can see that there are several different hi-hats playing. So I'm going to solo out this one in particular here. So if you can hear that. This sample here was just taken from the reference track. And the way I did it was just zoomed into this track and then found, like, say this kind of looks like a hi-hat. I would cut this out and then drag it into the drum rack over there. So that's an easy way to also steal some additional samples. If we listen to the rest of this track, of the hi-hat track, what I then did was, if we go into it, right here, we have at the top that sample from the actual track playing. Then it's reinforced with a different sample here. And there's a different hi-hat sample to have a bit more fullness to the hi-hat sound. And then I added an additional hi-hat to add a little skippy groove with the velocity turned down quite a bit. So that's the idea there. So stealing a bit of the sample, the hi-hat sample, and then also reinforcing it with some actual one-shot samples as well, with the plan there with the hi-hats. Then moving on. Oh, and then also I should say, particularly at this point, flicking back and forth to the reference and what we've been building to get the volumes and also to help decide on the sounds being selected. In terms of any other processing, there's a little bit of saturation going on here, and that's really about it. Next up, we have the clap. So in terms of the pattern, there's a clap playing on the 2 and 4, and then on the last 4 of this 2-bar phrase, there's an additional clap to add a little bit of emphasis. And so again, while building this out, the main thing was choosing the samples and setting the volumes while flicking back and forth to the reference, like this. Mine, reference, mine, listening to the claps, and using that to really guide the way. In terms of any processing, other than that, there's really just removing some lows, adding a bit of one knob saturation, and then using some of this one knob wider plugin to push everything to the left and right. Then we layered in this snare, which sounds like this. The MIDI is just on the 2 and 4 and the 2 and 4. In terms of the processing, really nothing going on here. So it really can be that simple. If you mostly focus on sound selection and reference the track that you want to sound like, and then also reference the volumes, that's the easiest way to really build up to get it sounding the same, maybe even louder and fuller in some instances too. Then other than that, I'm going to go to a part in the song where there's a little bit more going on, so we'll scooch it to over here. And there's also this open hi-hat that I added. Not sure if we flick to the reference right now. I think there's some kind of open hi-hat, so I kind of use that as a reference there. In terms of the processing, there are 2 layered. One might be panned. Let's have a look if I did anything interesting with the panning. Yeah, so one of the samples is panned a little bit to the right, and the other one is, you can click here, go into the actual sampler device. This one is not. So one is just sampled, pushed a little bit to the right. In terms of the processing, we're moving a bunch of the lows, using a transient designer to tighten up the sustain so that it is a little bit tighter of a sound, and then a little bit of saturation and a little bit of one knob width. And then we also added in this Congo loop. Just found this on Splice and kind of just threw it in there, removed a bunch of the lows so that the kick's still shining through, a little bit of sidechain so it's pumping and the kick again is shining through, a little bit of width to move it to the side, and then I added in the shaker. Very, very subtle here. Just a shaker loop that I like. Kind of sounds a little tribal to me. I like that. Removing a ton of the lows, a bit of sidechain, and that's really about it. So we can hear here it sounds pretty full, and when compared to the reference, pretty close. So this is a pretty solid way that you can go ahead and build out your own drums in the style of HUGEL, and this is a really great way to go about creating any song, really. Following the reference track, super important. Volumes and sound selection is really going to be the strongest thing there. All right. So let's work on this bass here. So the way that this bass is made up of is 2 layers. One is the sub layer that we're listening to right now, and the other is this mid bass layer. The mid bass is where we use AI, and the sub is just basically a simple sine wave sub. So right now we're soloing the low group. So in this low group, we have kick, the sub, and the mid bass. And what I want to do right now is just flick between this and the reference track a little bit. So you can kind of hear the idea of kind of traditional modeling or referencing. So this is the reference. This is ours. Reference and ours. So the basic technique that I went for here to emulate this is just flicking back and forth between the reference and what I created, and just tried to get it similar. So what I came up with is it looks like found that main note that's being hit over and over again is an E. And it does kind of sound like it's doing a low E and then an octave jump up. So it's very simple. It looks the MIDI right here. Another way that you can do this is, especially if you're remaking a track like this, you can look up key and BPM on Google for that track and try to find it. It can definitely make things a lot simpler. So usually the way I'll do it is I'll start by just with the bass, with the sub. So we'll have a listen to what that sounds like. This is the majority of the bass sound and where a lot of the weight is. So getting this down first is super important. Then when it comes to the mid bass, I'm going to solo the mid bass so you can hear how that's sounding with the kick. It's just some of the character in like that low mids, maybe some of the high mids as well, of the bass sound. It allows it to cut through and have a bit more interesting sound than just the subs. But before getting into that real quick, I guess the subs processing I'll show you real quick. I'm using a preset called Subs You Can Hear, which is made by a really cool YouTube channel called Seed to Stage. And basically it is just like mostly just a sine wave, but you can add some saturation and harmonics and stuff like that so that it will have a bit more than a sine wave, so you can hear it in laptop speakers a little bit clearer. And then there's just some one knob sidechain going on here. Everything else, nothing really is going on here. So let's jump into that. So once the main sub is created, I then duplicated that MIDI over to a separate track, and I removed that like octave jump up for whatever reason. I just didn't want that. It was an artistic creative choice. And then in terms of the processing here, we're using Synplant, which is the AI plugin that we'll be going into. But before diving into that in a little bit detail, I just want to show you some of the other processing that's going on. So just removing a bunch of the lows so that the subs is carrying all the weight. And this is just providing that mid-bass character. There's a bunch of one knob sidechain going on, a ton of saturation being added here, and using this one knob wider plugin, push things to the left and right to make the bass sound a little bit, wider, and remove some of the central information so the sub is front and center. In terms of creating this sound, so I think what's interesting about it is on its own, it doesn't sound all that interesting, but together it adds quite a nice little bit of extra character to the tune. So the way that I found it was I actually went through the reference track, and what I looked for was an area where the bass was kind of sticking out on its own. And so I'll head over to this little area here. I made this little group called Melodic AI. And so we'll solo this and turn it on. So what this is, which is pretty interesting, what I did was I ran the track through a website called lalal.ai. And with that, I was able to separate the instruments from the drums. And so you can hear there's no drums here. This is the actual song, Diplo and HUGEL Say Hi. Just used AI to extract all the instrument information. So then what I was able to do was I found a little spot where the bass is playing. Let me just kind of show you that. Let me turn it on and show you that. Let me figure out why it's not playing. And there we go. So you hear that. This is the little snippet I found. Boom. And then, so once you find an isolated snippet, which is nice to use something like Lala so that you can extract it, then what you can do is, I'll just show you how I kind of do that from scratch. So press Command T or Command Shift T to create a new MIDI file. And then what we'll do is Command F to search, and we're going to type in Synplant. And then, so remembering that our little bass audio snippet's right here, Command J to make sure that it's consolidated. We just want only this snippet to be added. So if we go over to this program called Synplant, and then we go to this area here called Geno Patch, this is where we can then upload. We just grab that bass patch and we could drop it in here. And then so we can listen to it. Oh, I should make sure that this is turned on as well. So this is the sound. And then what you do is you just press one of these, and it's going to listen to the sound and process a bunch of synthesized versions of it. And you can listen to each here. Like that sounds pretty close. That's the original, and this is the AI. And it gives you a bunch of different versions, so you can select whichever one you want. And just like that, you've extracted the AI sound. So it's definitely not perfect, I will say that. But it sounds pretty decent, I would definitely say. So with that said, that is a rundown of the bass. All you need to do is kind of take a listen to the original track and find the right notes. Use a sub to start to get the right notes down properly. And then you can leverage AI by using something like Lala to extract out the synths, then run that into an AI plugin like Synplant, where then you can then create your own mid-bass sounds to get that. That's a very similar character, and at the very least, a unique, interesting character that you can use. All right. So let's dive into creating all of the melodic elements for this track. Synth samples the vocals that you're hearing right now as well. One of the things I want to mention here right off the bat is that we have this reference track right here, and it's Diplo and HUGEL song Stay High featuring Julia Church. So if I solo this and switch to ours, back and forth a few times, you can hear that they're quite similar. And so that was really one of the main first tricks that you're going to want to pay attention to. Having a reference track is incredibly helpful for helping to build out all these elements. In particular, what we're going to be focusing on here is the melodic stuff. So I'm just going to close off the drums. We just have this kick drum, the bass, get rid of all these little effect sounds and stuff. And let's just focus on the melodic elements. So to show you this way that I think the best way would be to just grab everything and let's introduce everything in one by one. And let's turn off these vocals as well. So let's start with the order in which I created all these synths. So let's add this first one. So it's that little stab there. Hear it right now. And in terms of the MIDI, it is, I believe it's just an E note. But what's more interesting about this is we can switch back to the sample reference. So you can hear it's kind of like a synth stab. And so the way that I got this was I have this separate little folder over here called Mellow AI. So let's just listen to this right now. And so what this is I took that reference track, Diplo and HUGEL's Stay High tune, and what I did was I dragged it into a AI software website called lala.ai, and I use this to remove the drums so that all we're hearing is like the bass and the synth and all that kind of stuff. Then what I did was I went through this track and I picked out a bunch of the different sounds that I liked so that I could then replicate those sounds using AI. So let me show you what I mean by this. This is kind of interesting. So I'm going to solo out the stab. What we have is the stab that I liked. There was also the second stab. Very little, very subtle sound here. There's the vocal. And then bass, we'll skip that. I went over that in the bass video. Go here, little tom, and a little tom. And once I was able to cut them out like this, I was then able to, by pressing Command J, I was then able to extract this sound. And then I'll show you what we'll do here. So I'm going to press Command, Shift, and T to open up a MIDI track. And basically what I did was I'm using a tool called Synth. And so I'll just drag this onto our new MIDI clip. And what we can do with this is if we open this up, we can go over to this little DNA looking thing or whatever this is. It's called Genopatch. We can actually drag that sound into Genopatch and then we can play it. So that's the sound from the actual tune. And then if we press Evolve, it's going to use AI to listen to that song back and come up with different characteristics of that sound, and then use synthesis to recreate that sample, even though it's just an audio sample. So it's going through its process, it's doing its thing here. So if we listen to it back, this is the sounds, and then we can listen to the variations it made. So some of them are more on the nose than other ones, but it's really interesting that it can come up with something similar, get you in the ballpark, and then you can actually go over here and you can actually adjust all the synthesis if you'd like. But that was kind of the process of how I developed a bunch of these sounds. So separating everything using AI so that you have all the individual sounds by themselves so that you can cut up the parts that you want, and then you can drop them into something like Synth to have a synthesized version of that sample. So let's go through this process now. So you can hear that what I created there, that stab, is different than what was in the reference. So it's cool because it can get you in a similar area, but it also gives you a unique sound too. But one thing that I would definitely recommend is something I've been doing as an experiment with these AI plugins is also using sample reinforcement. So right now we have this sample I'm playing. What I'm going to do is then add in this layer here. Then I'll listen to this together. So what I did was I found a similar sound after doing the AI song and dance. Went into Splice, found a similar sound, dropped that in so it's playing around the same time. And now it's reinforcing the AI sound with a unique sample. In terms of the processing here, for the AI plugin, just removing a bunch of the lows. I set up an auto filter, basically brought down the frequency, and then added a bit of resonance, and I increased the envelope so that for each hit, it's going to pulse up to try to get that kind of wah sound. It didn't fully work, but it sounded good, so I kept it. A little bit of sidechain going on there, a bit of saturation to add some harmonics and fullness, and then width to push it to the left and right and make space in the middle. In terms of the stab, the sample that's reinforcing that AI note, just removing a bunch of the lows on that, some one knob sidechain, and that's pretty much it. Moving down, we're going to add in the next layer, which is another synth sound. And so what this is, we go back to the reference, it's the vocal. I'll wait for it to come in. That So that is the that I extracted using Lala, and then I just put that into Synplant, and that's the sound that came out. A little bit of processing going on here, removing some of the lows, one knob sidechain, a bit of saturation for fullness and harmonics, and then width pushing it to the left and right, making space in the middle, and a little bit of some kind of dub echo. And then what I use to reinforce that sound is this sound here, that little vocal hey. So those together, and I put it on so it was on the first and the third, as opposed to playing every time, just so it's a little bit more dynamic and changing. So that's how it sounds all together. Ready right now. And in terms of the processing on that vocal sample there, just again found this in Splice, found something that I liked. It sounded kind of similar. removing a bunch of the lows, some side chain, a little bit of saturation, and I think I have the exact same echo on there as well. Moving along, I added in these little toms. That coming up. And for each of these, I believe they're just always playing an E in terms of the note. So once I throw it into Synthplant, extract it using AI, using Lala, and then throwing it to Synthplant to AI the sound, it's kind of mimicking whatever chord or whatever's happening. So I've been just experimenting with just playing that single note. And then in terms of reinforcing it, there's a couple things going on here. I added these kind of tom sounds. In terms of the processing on the AI toms, see what we're looking at here, just removing some of the lows and shoving out some of the highs, some one knob sidechain, some saturation, and some width. And I probably did that just about the same for the other Synthplant version. In terms of the samples that are backing it up, it's very similar as well. Just a little bit of one knob sidechain, sometimes saturation, sometimes width. And then I have a third sound here. This brass is about to come in right now. Really cool sound, and that's emphasizing the second tom sound, and I do it, it's just like in the middle of each of one of the phrases. Let's have a look through the rest of the tune, see what else we have. This additional stab sound, which is reinforcing the first tom, and let's keep looking. Now we're gonna be looking at some sounds. If we listen back to the reference, and this to ours, what I've also added is some pads. This is I don't know what the chord is. I'm not super into music theory or sound design. I'm into sampling and doing AI and weird things to create songs. So this is the MIDI if you want to figure that out. In terms of the processing, I'm using this UVI Workstation Noctua, some kind of preset here, breathing. Didn't do too much there, removing a bunch of the lows, some one knob sidechain, the width pushing it to left and right a little bit, and I have this auto filter with an LFO mapped to the frequency, so it's slowly opening up the low pass filter there, adding in more highs. So basically kind of adding some motion and change. Then what I did is I grabbed that MIDI that I made from that pad there, dropped it into this additional Synthplant track, added an arpeggiator to it so that those chords are now being arpeggiated. Synthplant, I can't remember exactly what's going on here, some random sound that I've made. And then it's going into a portal preset. Show you what that looks like real quick. Just some random preset I found in there, nothing too crazy, just makes it sound a little interesting. Removing a bunch of the lows, some sidechain, some saturation, and some one knob there, one knob width. And I think one of the last things I want to show you is the vocal. And I guess let's get the drums back in for this. So for this, in the Stay High tune, it's like that cover of that, or remix of that Stay High song. I tried to do something different. I used the Supremes to Keep Me Hanging On. So you can hear it here. And then cut it up so it's kind of like it's an echo, but I just cut up the sample to sound like an echo. And then we'll listen to the tune, the vocal fully in. Sounds pretty cool, I would say. And just really quickly, the way that I did this was keep the music going. Actually, I kind of like this radio DJ style vibe. I grabbed the Supremes track and I dropped it into that Lala plugin as well to extract the vocals out, and then now I have the vocals, and that's how they're fairly clean. In terms of the processing, just moving some of the lows, shoving out a bit of the high. I used a little bit of compression to kind of tame the signal a little bit. It was getting a little wild. It's a pretty fast attack with a slow release ratio of 4, and going from about a decibel to 2, sometimes 3 decibels of gain reduction, a bit of sidechain, one knob saturation to add the fullness, and a little bit of width to pull it to the side. And then in terms of that kind of echo sound, what I have here is very similar processing, because I also have this auto filter where I have the frequency being slowly automated to sound like it's fading away. And that is a look at the synths and samples for this tune. All right. So now what we're gonna do is a playthrough of this entire track, and I'm gonna be calling out all the changes that are gonna be happening. So right now we are in the intro section. This is 16 bars of the intro. What we have going on here is the kick. The kick has been, has some of the lows filtered out right now. And we have these little risers and reverse crashes about to go into the next section, which is about to be 16 bars of where the sub kicks in. That was a macro transition. What we have now is the kick has been fully added, so there's no more of it, the lows being removed. The sub bass has kicked in. You can hear definitely that a pad has been introduced as well. So now we are in the second half of the sub. So what was added was that Congo loop. So that's adding some micro transitions, some changes, variety, and we're going into first break. So for this break, we had some kind of reverse sounds, swishes going into it and out of it. And we've removed the kick to drop the energy. And this is going to be a short 8-bar break into the sub coming back in. We had little lasers going into that section. And now the kick is back in. We also added a ride, so it's a little bit different. There's more energy building from the previous section. And this is going to go into another break, you can hear. At this point, added in some vocals from the Supremes. Awesome tune, awesome sample. So in this point, the kick is still there, but the auto filter is removing a bunch of the lows. And this structure is from the HUGEL track. So they have, it's the 16 bars plus 8, so whatever that would be, 24 bars of a break, a little different. And then we also have the 909 roll coming in, the vocals being chopped up and echoed. Going to the next drop. Cool. So now that we're in the first real drop, the main difference is that we do have this kind of repeating vocal pattern in, slowly fading away. And we're using a lot of these reverse crashes and lasers every 4-8 bars or so to create interest and change. We're gonna have a micro transition here, kick gets removed, kick comes back in. So now in the second half, so the first 16 bars of the drop were without vocals. The second half with the next 16 bars include the vocals. Slowly adding in more of the elements. We're going into a big break. So removed all the drums so that it sounds different. A lot of the we're trying to have contrast from the other sections of the song. And we have this piano kind of element being added in. First 8 bars are finished, so we added in these snare claps. And the first 16 bars are about to finish, so we're gonna make another change after this 8-bar section. We've added the kick that has the lows removed. And we also added in the subs and the bass with the lows removed as well. 909 roll is slowly building up the energy. That was another 8 bars. We have only, it's a weird small cut. That's how it is done in the HUGEL song. You can see here, so I followed that. So it's gonna go to like a little pause into the final drop. So the final drop, usually what I'll try to do is add something. So you can hear that like synth note. Singing terribly. I think it's just this kalimba here. I just pitched up some sounds, moved them up. Okay, so that was the first 16 bars of the drop. Now we're gonna have a little micro transition by removing the kick. And now we're going into the build down, 16 bars of a build down. The idea here is to slowly reduce the energy. If you look at it as if the first half of the tune, we're slowly building up the energy to each drop. And then once that final drop hits, we're gonna slowly build down the energy and then get to an outro so the song can be mixed out by a DJ. We're gonna have a little reverse crash and lasers into the last bit. Micro transition with the kick.
being removed. And now just 16 bars of an outro. So what we have here is the kick playing. Most of the drums are playing, hi-hats, claps, snares, remove that open hi-hat, and a few of the synth elements are playing through this section as well. I'm just gonna ride this out for the last 16 bars. And yeah, I've been Matt from Best Friends Club, and you've been the best. Hopefully this will give you a solid idea of how you can arrange your own songs super easily by creating arrangement tracks that are following a reference track of tunes that you really like and want to sound like. And then you can easily just kind of arrange vertically, build your track down, get all of the layers, and then stretch that out over the course of the rest of the song, arrange the track horizontally. Hello again, my friend. Hopefully you found that video useful. If you'd like to follow along yourself with the 5-step song finishing checklist, there will be a link in the description below where you can get access to that completely for free, and it's going to help you finish your songs a lot faster and better than ever before. If you found this video useful, like and subscribe and all that good stuff, but really the best thing I can do for you is hook you up with that free checklist, so make sure you check that one. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video, my friend. Have a good one.